In the beginning of 2001, A Space Odyssey, we stare into nothingness. This blank screen with a humming sound in the background. What is this, and what is its purpose? Remember this, as we'll be coming back to it later. In the opening of the film, the moon in the foreground, the Earth in the center, and the sun in the background form something even greater than an impressive compositional shot. What we're seeing is actually called a syzygy, an astronomical term that means three celestial bodies aligning. Much later in the film, we see this again, albeit in a different area of outer space. A syzygy can have an effect on gravity, but there's a more spiritual element to showing these alignments in 2001. Celestial alignment, eclipses and the like, are often said to be portents of change. It's no mere coincidence that these alignments are shown at the end of the film, immediately before the famous psychedelic sequence, commonly called the Stargate scene, that changes human perception and biology forever. And, in the beginning of the film, immediately before the dawn of man, the sequence in the film that also changes human perception and biology forever. The syzygy is a visual cue to the audience that what is about to happen is momentous to humankind, and that extra attention should be paid. Director Stanley Kubrick has said, "I don't like to talk about 2001 much because it's essentially a non-verbal experience. Less than half of the film has dialogue. It attempts to communicate more to the subconscious and to the feelings than it does to the intellect. I think clearly there's a basic problem with people not paying attention with their eyes. They're listening, and they don't get much from listening to this film. Those who won't believe their eyes won't be able to appreciate this film." So with this framework for watching 2001 A Space Odyssey in mind, let's talk about the dawn of man in the film, a long series of scenes with no real dialogue, though plenty of action and imagery to tell the story and inflame the senses. Bones are scattered unceremoniously, suggesting a way of life that does not honor the dead, an inevitability of a harsh existence, of prehistory. If there is no language, there are no stories, nobody is remembered. The early primates are seen cohabitating with beasts, neither dominant, our ancestors, only animals not dissimilar from the other pack animals around them. And then the leopard, a primate dies, the food chain, a battle over resources, only muddy water, a nod to the audience or a wink that says war is primitive, a carryover from an older time. And then it feels as though the heart of the film appears, the monolith. An early primate investigates. In the novel by Arthur C. Clarke, written concurrently with the film, not adapted, the man-ape, as Clarke called him, is called Moon Watcher. Again, celestial significance. In the novel, the monolith is transparent, more like ice, but in the film it's endlessly black. In the book, the monolith tests the skills of the early primates in a series of exercises, but in the film, more our focus here, we are told nothing about what it's doing. We have to watch. We have to experience the film as visual art, as visual storytelling. We have to be hypnotized, in a sense, told through motion, told through cause and effect in imagery what is happening. And then we see it. Moonwatcher develops the use of tools. His destruction of the bones isn't mindless. It could be symbolic of his belief that his people have now conquered death itself. They are above the other animals. It's hubris, but it's not without some accuracy, some merit. It's here that we reach one of the most important themes of the film, intelligence and the need to use it responsibly. From the monolith, the primates have gained greater knowledge and skill, but in becoming more organized in creating a society, a kind of proto-government, greed appears, avarice. The desire for power, using human intelligence and invention responsibly, reappears later in the film, in an even more dangerous form, but it begins in the distant past, the beginnings of our minds, and later in the distant future. HAL 9000 is the artificial intelligence that controls virtually everything on the Discovery 1. He is said to be perfect with a flawless performance record, incapable of making mistakes. Notice HAL's appearance, a single eye like a cyclops. A singular vision and focus, yes, but one that can't see the whole picture. When we see from HAL's perspective, it's deformed. HAL can mimic humans and even understand humans, but he will never see the human world the way we do. But HAL is alive, and he demonstrates the first instinct of all life, self-preservation, by murdering Frank Poole. In this act, HAL actually becomes more human than his creators ever anticipated. Arthur C. Clarke's explanation for HAL's breakdown is that the computer was under orders to deny that the mission was actually about evidence of alien life, the monolith. HAL was also built to be 100% reliable. These two directives are in conflict, and because of this, he malfunctioned. In the film, it was never fully revealed. Plus, the director may have had his own ideas. Maybe HAL genuinely believed that humans couldn't be trusted with such an important mission, and he took over the best way he knew how.
How would you account for this discrepancy between you and the Twin 9000?
Well, I don't think there is any question about it. It can only be attributable to human error. This sort of thing has cropped up before, and it has always been due to human error.
I will broach this next subject only in hopes of debunking it. Fan theorists have long hypothesized that HAL 9000 is a jab at computer company IBM. As fan theories go, it's admittedly compelling. But in terms of validity and intent, it's garbage. The idea is that the letters HAL are all one letter prior to IBM, which is both true and misleading. The name for HAL went through several drafts, including Socrates and Athena. Perhaps these names were far too human, so it was decided that the computer should be named something more artificial. HAL's full name is Heuristically Programmed Algorithmic Computer, or HAL for short. That is where the name comes from, and not IBM. Kubrick even had a working relationship with IBM, keeping them informed about the script, and was said to be embarrassed when the coincidental name was suggested as intentional after the release of the film. Arthur C. Clarke not only denied all of this, but found it so objectionable and, frankly, stupid, that he refuted it in the sequel novel 2010, Odyssey 2, and then again in The Lost Worlds of 2001. It is not only a coincidence, but something that actually annoys Clarke. This excerpt from the latter book shows that while Clarke acknowledges that the math suggests it's a rather unlikely coincidence, it is still just that. And yet the rumor persists. Eagle-eyed fan theorists have noted that this scene with Dave shows a light display on his face that almost resembles the letters IBM, but it's actually not. If you look at the computer monitors earlier in the film, you will no doubt see that each has a 3-letter display, NAV for navigation, LIF for life support, and so forth. Looking close here, you can make out one that displays MEM, short for memory. And now, back to the alleged IBM display, it actually says MEM, memory. It's just that when Dave tilts his head, the letters are slightly obscured, and people have mistaken this for IBM. It is categorically not. We can see the letters IBM on the spacesuit, but this was never meant to be hidden. IBM helped Kubrick with the film. That's why it's there, and that's only why it's there. IBM is one of the companies that exists in the future. It's not an Easter egg. It's meant to be seen. Now, I freely admit to being fascinated by this fan theory when I was younger, even suckered in by it. But a little bit of added research and a frame-by-frame slowdown of certain scenes quickly disproves all of it. Consider this analysis an apology for even referencing this quackery in the past. With that being said, it should be noted that once art is set free, delivered to the masses, its meaning may no longer belong to its creators. If one wants to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey as commentary on IBM of all things, have at it. Just understand that all of the evidence is quite simply bunk. And finally, the film and the book both speak about the danger of using invention irresponsibly without having to rope in one particular computer company. The messaging is already there. One need not become a cryptographer to see it. It's right there, not too far below the surface. 2001: A Space Odyssey is a unique product on account of its origins. Rather than a film adaptation of a novel or an original screenplay, 2001, both as a novel and as a film, was a collaboration between Arthur C. Clarke and Stanley Kubrick. Although the genesis of the narrative is often said to be Clarke's earlier story, The Sentinel, aspects of what would eventually become 2001 came from several prior stories written by Clarke, reworked and with new material added to create this masterpiece. Having recently read it, it's clear that Kubrick's film actually departs greatly from Clarke's material, partly because 2001 went through several drafts, partly because Kubrick had his own ideas, and partly because of the completely different and unique language of film. In the movie, it ends with the Star Child floating above Earth. In the novel, the Star Child detonates a nuclear bomb. In the novel, the function of the monolith is made perfectly clear, as are Hal's motivations. The film wishes to be more symbolic, visually suggestive, and that's something that can only be accomplished in a visual medium. A novel has the luxury of world building, the lattice upon which to hang all of this plot. The first section of the novel reads less like an adventure and more like the Bible, whereas the film allows the senses to take over. Film lectures in imagery. With this in mind, let's examine the cinematography of the film. This is a one-point perspective, or single-point perspective. It's a camera technique in which the picture plane is parallel to two axes of a rectilinear scene. And that's a bit of a mouthful, but it basically just means that a scene that's composed of elements that intersect only at right angles. Background, props. Here it is again. The image draws the eyes into one focal point. The famous Stargate sequence is achieved without the benefit of modern computers. It's actually a strictly mechanical process called slit-screen photography. It's a process in which a movable slide with a slit cut into it is put between the camera and the subject. It looks like this in production. The Stargate is really just gels and lines that create a psychedelic array of colors. All visual effects of the film were done in camera in order to keep the quality from degrading. And the result is a series of images that still look convincing even by today's standards. Scenes involving characters defying gravity were done using a centrifuge, rotating it while the actor walked or ran in sync with its motion. Anyway, this is all technique, machinery. What did Kubrick hope to accomplish by creating such a visually rich world, besides its inherent beauty? He wanted to create myth. That's what the authors have said of this work. The goal of 2001: A Space Odyssey is to create a modern myth. The most obvious parallel is that of the Odyssey, the epic tale attributed to Homer. It centers on Odysseus and his journey home after the fall of Troy. Arthur C. Clarke likened this to space travel, venturing into uncharted territories. Dave's surname, Bowman, may refer to Odysseus' expertise in archery, and Hal, a villain with only one eye, may be a reference to the mythical Cyclops in the same story. Dave Bowman and Hal, Odysseus and the Cyclops, the struggle of humanity against inhumanity spanning thousands of years.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
This isn't idle speculation. Clarke has admitted that the Odyssey was a serious influence on the story. The author's explanation of the entire project, book and film, is this. 2001: A Space Odyssey is about man's past and future life in space. It's about concern with man's hierarchy in the universe, which is probably pretty low. It's about the reactions of humanity to the discovery of higher intelligence in the universe. We set out with the deliberate intention of creating a myth. The Odyssey in parallel was in our minds from the beginning, long before the film's title was chosen. So, does all of this relate to the ending? After traveling through a kaleidoscope of color, Dave arrives in a lavishly decorated home. He rapidly ages before our eyes, years within minutes, and then, on what appears to be his deathbed, the monolith emerges, giving humanity one more gift: new life. Note that the sculptures and paintings that adorn his room are Renaissance art, meaning rebirth. He becomes a star child and returns to Earth, his home, much like Odysseus, and the film ends. From the beginning of human evolution to this new life form, 2001: A Space Odyssey spans millennia to give us our modern myth. Clarke has been more forthcoming than Kubrick in explaining 2001, and because they ended up as fairly separate entities, some mysteries of the film will always feel unsolved. There is an endless sea of interpretations to the film, many of which are layered on top of the other and are not mutually exclusive. The novel gives us clues to the many mysteries of the film, but considering how much the two sources deviate from one another, the book can't possibly be considered the only text and the only solution. So many questions. Kubrick refused to answer all of them. He once compared it to something as vulgar as Leonardo da Vinci writing an explanation at the bottom of the Mona Lisa, so he left it to us to think, to feel, to interpret as we see fit. So what about the blank screen with the humming music? Let's listen. It's actually the same as this scene. And this scene, the monolith is speaking to people, trying to parse out information, and in the same way, this film is too. Understanding this film doesn't have to involve a lot of conspiracy theory nonsense about IBM or whatever else is floating around. 2001: A Space Odyssey is about what science fiction is almost always about: the future. Thanks for watching.